I would like to invite on stage Ms. Shalini Sankarashana, MD and the country manager at Planview, who will be moderating this session. And with her joining this panel, I would like to invite on stage Mr. Kuppuswamy Venkatramani, MD Health and Glow from Unilever, Ms. Priya Subramani, VP and GM Freshworks, and Mr. Sundar Balasubramanian, VP and Business Segment Leader at Intuit. Please give a big round of applause. Over to Shalini to introduce the panel and take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. So nice to see you. Thank you for joining. This is probably one of my recent favorite topics, the growth models, right? So before we get into the topic, wanted to just introduce, I have an esteemed panel. Mr. Venkatramani is the Managing Director of Health and Glow and has a lot of war stories to share with us on how to grow the business. So we'll go through that. Yes, sir. Ms. Priya, she's leading a very, very successful business within Freshworks and comes from a very long pedigree of product management across multiple sectors. Prior to Freshworks, you were in Walmart, and prior to that, Yahoo. So there's a long pedigree, and we'll deep dive into the whole product part of the growth model. And Sundar is a seasoned product leader again in Intuit, and Intuit is known for innovation, design thinking, and very, very practical and seasoned practices of product management. Truly looking forward to hear from you, Sundar. With that, let's kind of deep dive into the conversation. So I want to start asking the same question to all of you. When we talk of growth, let me just give a bit of a backstory. Today, when we see unicorns, soonicorns, decacorns, there is a huge rush of metrics, typically vanity metrics, which kind of talk about growth picture in the market. But when rubber hits the road, you start seeing these vanity metrics don't hold up. So in that context, from all three of you, would love to hear what is growth and what do you look at as fundamentals for growth? How do you measure growth? Not a theoretical ones, but because you're all leading businesses, would love to hear experiences, and then we'll deep dive.
So maybe I'll take a stab at this. So growth for a business is really, you look back at what you did like the previous quarter, the previous year, and what are you doing over and above that? Where is it that you are driving more value, right? So we typically measure it in, new customers added quarter over quarter, or we look at new business, especially I come from a SaaS company, so it's about, how many new businesses have I signed on, right? It's also about expansion, right? I might have started in one account, how much have I grown those accounts? So those are how we measure growth. And the flip side is also, how happy are your customers? So we look at churn, which is, really, are we reducing that? Because that, in a way, is also growth for us. So that's typically how we measure how the business is doing as in terms of growth.
I think Shekhar probably hit upon some of these earlier, right? Which is the fundamentals of the business. We look at is the business sustainable based on the fact that it's solving a problem that needs to be solved, it's a critical problem that yet needs to be solved. We as a business are uniquely positioned to solve it in a way that's sustainable and competitive, right? And if you have those fundamentals in place, then growth becomes like what Priya said. Is it a leaky bucket versus do you have a sustainable business that has the right level of retention, that has the right level of economics for it to be a 5-year, 10-year story. That you can pick the metric you want, but ultimately that's the business you're trying to build.
So I think in a population like India, and I think most of you sitting in this room, growth is natural, right? Growth will happen whether you do anything or no. The question is, what kind of growth do you really want to drive? I think it was somewhere in the early 2000s when Alan Lafley was brought back to head Procter & Gamble. And I think at that point in time, he moved a few people from India to head North America and other businesses, saying that the mindset in India is very different. Even if you're growing at 20%, you feel you haven't met 25, whereas North America is happy with 2%, 3%, etc. So growth is there. I think the question is, what is sustainable growth? And what do you, I mean, are you going to kind of achieve growth by burning cash for 3-5 years, saying I have the capacity, let's grab the terrain? Or you say that I need to ensure that best comes before big and really kind of sharpen your proposition and ensure that you're really competitive and serving your customers better than the others. The choices are yours, but I think we all know, I mean, especially in the last 7 to 8 years, we've seen massive growths, we've seen massive falls, we've seen, the question is, do you want to shake when you're 6 months old and learn to walk? Or whether at 25 you fear that you can't walk anymore and have a grand fall. So.
Lovely. So I heard sustainability, I think building sustainable business. So we are talking of long term. So growth is not just short term. We did speak of incrementally growing, which is I think what Priya spoke about. And third is growth at a fundamental level. So let's explore this a bit more. The reason we brought this topic is obviously the theme of the summit is scaling the product ecosystem. So we heard about the ecosystem part of it from Mr. Sunil in the prior session. In this session, we wanted to explore what are the typical growth models. So you have fundamentals of growth, which we all talked about as a definition. But there are newer models emerging, and which is one of them is being product-led growth. We had an interesting conversation when 4 of us met prior to the panel as to, is product-led growth really a new model? I know you had some thoughts. Do you want to start with what do you believe product-led growth is? And is it a really new model, and what does it mean for traditional businesses?
I think product is something that you craft, product or service, whatever. You craft something to satiate a need. So I think that was for sales-led. I think there was a question whether it is product-led or sales-led. I thought sales can't lead anything, sales is the outcome. But I think here everything seems to be product-led because the context of the conversation, I understand that. But everything has to be consumer-led. It's got to start with the consumer. Only when you understand the consumer, their needs very well, can you craft your solutions very well. Crafting is equally important, but if you craft a solution while not really catering to a certain need in a competitive manner and better than the others, you really don't have sustainability. And then comes the ability to deliver that to the consumer in the way they want to be delivered and consumed. So whether you talk of a soap or a 5-star experience or a software or an app or whatever, I think it all starts with the consumer. And all of the levers have a place in order to drive that growth. The product has to be strong, it needs to be enriched, it needs to be strengthened constantly. The delivery, there'll be newer channels of delivery. These days it is online, offline, and within online there are several. Within offline now there used to always be a lot. So now it's interesting to see even online there are several. There is some, social commerce, there is some other commerce, etc. So there will be multiple ways, and whichever suits your business and whichever connects you better with the customers really kind of matters. So it's a mix. Product can lead, but again, the product advantage is never permanent.
Okay. So all of you heard that, right? So what I'm going to say, because I think this is absolutely the truth that we have heard so far, and we've seen it well, because ultimately it's the consumer who leads the conversation. So just taking a step back and talking about what is product-led growth, it talks about product being at the center and the heart of the entire business model. It talks of the product and the user really driving the power, which means your sales and marketing and every effort essentially being consumed, essentially being represented by the product, and that being one of the backbones for building a repeatable SaaS business. So the reason we are again talking about is we are talking of it's not the 0 to 1 part. You have several models, but once you reach a stage of 1, how do you scale in a hockey stick way? So with that context, and you heard Mr. Venkatramani saying that product is at the center of it, but it cannot be always at the center. So I want to switch this question back to Priya now. Priya, in Freshworks context, it is known to be a product-led organization. How are you seeing, is there a change in direction? Are you seeing a maturing of the thinking around product-led growth? Would love to hear that.
Yeah. So, if you really think about what product-led growth is, and coming back to your point, it's all about the customer, right? It's all about the consumer. So, what these, whether it's SLG or MLG or PLG, product sales, marketing-led growth, it's a way of showing the customer value, right? And in that respect, what product-led growth is, it's really a way to lead the customers to meaningful outcomes in a very step-by-step self-service way, right? You get to experience the product speaks for itself, right? And that's how you decide whether or not it meets your needs. So there are certain environmental conditions and certain things where PLG really works, but for a company like Freshworks, we started as really targeting SMBs, and SMBs, it was much more of a, I would say PLG is more of a pull. The customer comes, a business is looking for a solution, right? And what you do is you help them sign up. It's either a free trial or it's a, you start and you can use a free version with limited capabilities. But it's really a way for the customer who's looking and already has the need to start experiencing the product. And then you like it and you stay. And then, so this worked really well in the early years for Freshworks. We, pretty much even now, a good chunk of our customers are in the SMB space, and we continue to improve our entire PLG funnel. I mean, it's very, very data-driven. So every week, all of us look at, okay, what happens when the sign-up happens? How do we lead them to conversion? Where are they following? It's extremely scientific a method. But then as you reach a point where your products have become more complex, obviously our products have evolved a lot. We've added a lot more capability, features. We've added bots. We've added a bunch of things. And it's no longer as simple as it was earlier. So now, and we're also aspiring to target other segments, right? We've gone mid-market. Now that's where you don't see a product-led growth, just, a mid-market or an enterprise customer is not just going to come try it and sign up, right? There is you have to start with influencing your, decision makers. You have to go through a very different sales process, and that's where we have seen it. So we've evolved to, we have our product-led pipeline. We have our entire, sales-led when depending upon the customer, and we also have something in between, a hybrid. So now what we do is we also have product-led where we, get them to a point, but if they need assistance, there's a way that they can reach out. So it's minimal interaction still, but you can get a demo, you can get sales assistance. So we, we do bring that flavor in as well.
Interesting. So, so it's in a way then a myth to talk about an entire organization and a portfolio of products being on a singular model called PLG. I think that's what we're kind of saying. But you also mentioned product-led growth having key characteristics, which is, consumer-led, number one. But the consumer is also owning the experience, which is the self-service part of it. So building self-service characteristic in especially B2B businesses is a hard ask. And especially if you have product portfolios of varying life cycle stages, some in inception stage, some in growth, some are mature, which is what Intuit has. How do you look at this whole conversation from your perspective, Sundar?
Before that, I just want to say that I wouldn't fully agree that product-led growth is new, right? If I look at QuickBooks, which was founded almost 3 decades ago, it was founded in a red ocean of accounting products. And what led to the growth is that the product understood the customer better than anybody else. Wonderful. And word of mouth took care of the rest, right, to where we are today. So
that's an excellent point.
I think product-led growth has always been there. I think the way, at least we look at it, is there are 3 levers: product, marketing, sales, among many others, but at least these 3 levers. Which lever you use depends on the life cycle of the product, and also depends on the industry or the customer you're serving. So if you'd say, irrespective of whether it's B2B, B2C, hybrid, if it's a new product, you are really first building on product. If your product, and Shekhar highlighted this earlier today as well, right? If your product is not the right fit for the customer you're trying to solve for, and if you're not very clear about which segment you're going after, you can pull all other levers, you're not going to get anywhere, you're just going to keep getting leaky buckets, right? So you may start there, but then very soon you have to then be, when you get to a place where you've gone past the initial product market fit, you're starting to ramp up, and that's when marketing or sales or both start kicking in. And whether it's marketing led or sales led depends, like Priya said, on the type of customer. If it's a SMB or a B2C, it's probably more DIY, low touch. It's more pull based, so you can pour more marketing dollars on it, content, media spend, integrated marketing, all of that. If it is more B2B or even mid-market, which behaves more like B2B, even if it's not enterprise, there it's more push rather than pull. And yes, marketing is a lever. It's an enabler, but not leading the conversation. You probably have your sales, inside sales, outside sales, partners, the entire ecosystem working in your favor to drive it. So I would say these are three levers. Which lever you pull depends on which stage of the life cycle the product is in and the type of the customer you're serving.
Understood. I have a question. Do we all think Apple is a product-led organization? Please.
For the audience or us?
For the audience, for all of you. Let's ask the audience. How many of you think Apple is a product-led organization? Okay, 50% of the room thinks it's product-led. What do you all think?
I think somewhere in the early 90s or late 90s, I remember reading this article where it talked about two kinds of business models, or two kinds of growth. One is product-led growth or product innovation, two kinds of innovations. One is product innovation, the other is a business model innovation. So the example there was Apple always followed a product-led innovation, yeah, but they were not great at business model innovation. As a consequence, the Dells and others of the world really innovated on the business model on a product that they had built and made much more money than Apple ever did. Okay? But I think the second innings was fantastic. I think the product innovation was so high and way ahead of others that others found it difficult. Even if they kind of matched a little, they could never match the experience. But yes, even today, India is an Android country. But I think, at least for the rest of the world, they managed to innovate their business model in order to ensure that they reaped the returns for their product innovation for the last, 10 to 12 years, etc. Otherwise, in the first round, I think that's where they faltered.
So if I paraphrase it, while if we have aspirations of being product-led, apart from the characteristics that Priya described, it's also about how do you continue to relook at your business model, number one. Number two, if you take Apple's example and that kind of a success, one is the business model. In my mind, it's also they almost built an entire ecosystem around the product. So that is a very, very different scale. So just taking you to reimagine what could product-led growth be. So that was the question. Any thoughts from you? Or any of you?
Yeah, I mean, I do think Apple, in a way, is an example of product-led, right? You start with one and you're constantly upgrading, getting more, right? So you experience it for yourself, then you can't let go, right? You see, I mean, I don't know the value part, but you definitely are hooked, right? So I think, in a way, you start with one and they keep, they've expanded their ecosystem and their range of products, and you just, seamlessly move from one to the other. So I think to that extent, the innovation and extreme, I think, innovation and just building that customer cult that they have, I think that's kind of what their popularity is.
The cult, right? Yeah.
I think one of the best places to understand what drives a company, just look at their motto, right? And for Apple, it still remains making some of the best products in the planet. It's product first and everything else secondary. So yeah, I completely agree. I think it's still a product-led company.
Awesome. So just now tying this whole conversation back to the scaling theme. So we talked of how do you grow, and there are various models, but we all kind of converging that product is at the center of it, but you have to pull multiple levers based on the situation and the maturity. Now when we get into a scaling context, so you build, you're focusing on product, but as you start scaling, especially after you hit the product market fit, what are your thoughts on how do you scale? Are there different models to look at when you're on a scaling stage? And specific functions or levers that you want to look at in a growth mode?
Yeah, I can talk. I think even before you start scaling, I think there is a phase where you start ramping up in preparation or anticipation of scaling, right? So you're getting more clearer about the value prop for the product and clearer about the segmentation and what customers you're serving. You're much clearer, probably even have funnel metrics like what Priya said already in place. So you can actually start understanding the investments you're making, are they actually turning into the outcomes you're seeking? And then you get into what channels you want to activate, whether depending on the type of the product, whether it's media spend versus for instance, if I look at QuickBooks, we do media spend, but we also have a very passionate community of accountants and what we call pro advisors. That's a huge set of partners for us. We have partners of other types as well, where we spend as much time and effort and investment as much as we spend on, let's say, your typical funnel metrics of SEO, etc., etc. So depending on the
if I can just double click on that bit, because this is a very popular question or concern when people talk about especially the PLG model, which is customer acquisition. So you talked of media spend, you talked of building a community of your users. If there is this concern that you have to throw cash, you have to burn a lot because you have to bring in customers, whether it's a push or a pull, but your product is there, you're giving away, you're putting in freemium kind of models. So you're burning a lot, chasing the metric of how many customers am I able to acquire. Then you have to worry about retention, then you're worrying about renewals. So that is where the counter for the PLG comes in. I want to just hear your thought on that.
Yeah, I think if you've proved your hypothesis that the only thing that's stopping you from growth is pouring more media spend or dollars, you've done enough tests to indicate that you 2x this, you're going to get 10x on the other end, then that's a great problem to have, right? But more often than not, like you said, it's easy to spend even before you've proved product market fit. A lot of times you're not even clear about what segment you're going after, because if in doubt, it's easy to spray and pray, right? So until you've gone past all those stages and you're clear that this is the only problem and I can scale, that's a good time to scale. But more often than not, it's probably in before that.
Thank you. I want to switch back to Mr. Venkatramani, because when I look at Health and Glow, for example, you're touching sectors, your beauty, wellness, health, fabrics, textiles. So these are sectors that have been existing for a very, very long time with probably very established problem statements. And products also, which are we spoke about, our toothpaste, a soap. You have these products which have existed. How do you look at innovation here in terms of either business model or a scaling model? Any thoughts?
I think there is always, there is a lot of room for innovation actually. I think in the context of scaling up, I think first, whatever is your proposition, you need to ensure that it is scalable. And then everything else comes, because half the time, so if we take the simple case of a soap, once the soap is with you, nobody can tell you how to use it. You are using it the way you are using it, and that is right. If somebody says, oh no, you need to use it, you need to let it lather, stay on the skin for 5 minutes, and then you'll experience the way, forget it. My usage pattern is my usage pattern. I need to understand that. I need to ensure that my product gives you satisfaction in the same grain as the usage. If that doesn't happen, then scalability is a myth. Okay, you'll have other challenges later on. The second is that these days, and it's fascinating, over the years, when I was a young marketing and sales guy and whatever, business guy, when somebody asked me to make a marketing plan, I made a marketing plan. I said, how many people do I need to be aware? How many need to consider? How many need to get converted? How many of them will have repeated usage? And therefore, at what frequency? And what is therefore the revenue? And for that kind of revenue, for this math to work, how much do I need, what channels do I need to use to kind of reach them? What is the kind of budget that I will need? Today, when I ask for a marketing plan, everybody is only talking spends. No one has a clue, and that's why money doesn't work for most of the brands. What's your reach going to be? That's it. There's no understanding of a reach or a conversion from that particular reach. What is the conversion of all the money that you'll spend? Whichever medium you pick, it's 1%, 1.5%, 0.5%, 2%, that's it. Everybody is struggling with ROAS. It's now out that it's much more difficult to acquire consumers, much more costlier. It's bound to be, right? So in all these contexts, I think the proposition is important, whether it is a store, okay, and today, for example, it's our 25th year. And if I look at the history of the organization, we've been relevant and contemporary at all times. We were one of the first to introduce dermacosmetology products in our store. No other retailer did it, okay? But when more people, set up stores around you, and brands have ambitions and they distribute all across. Today, Mamaearth is available at a Panwala also, because they have their business model to reach the rural markets and all of those. Just availability is no longer a differentiator, right? So what we've done now in this 25th year of ours is really saying that we will take our credibility with our customers to a different level. So we start offering personalization. The brands are all the same, but one thing we figured, most women, the ladies in the room, how many of you know your skin type? 3, maybe 4 hands, that's it. Most women do not know what their skin type is. And if they know the skin type, do you know what is the skincare regimen that is best suited for you? No. 1%. So that 4 has already come down to 1. Okay? So these are the 2 prime issues. So most women go through using products by trial and error. They try figuring out from the person standing in the store. They try asking their friend what works for you. The friend will say, this worked for me, you should try it. But her skin type is different from yours, right? Unfortunately, this is a category where women don't know what they want. Because the knowledge is too vast. The simplest thing is for a dermatologist to tell you what exactly you need to use. But that's not a natural thing that we do. It's worse than a psychiatrist. So what we do is today, when you walk into our store, we have a simple tablet that our experts will administer. They'll say, we'll do a free skin test for you. So that captures your skin type, your skin condition, your lifestyle, how many hours you spend in the sun, how many, do you use makeup or no, is your skin sensitive? And based on all of this, the dermatologist throws up a recommendation that suits your skin and your lifestyle. And what that does, when you start using that regimen, we've seen a different level of trust today with our customers. Now, can this be done? The answer is yes. Are others doing it? That's a function of knowledge that you have, plus an understanding of the consumer. Can others do it? The answer is yes. Will they do it? Maybe sometime, but not right now. So there we have an edge, but we are aware this edge will go away sometime. We've started with skin. We're going to do it with makeup. We're going to do it with hair. So to answer your question, there is room for innovation constantly. Now this is one innovation. The other is in terms of products. You'll be surprised at what kind of product innovations are actually possible and at what kind of price points. I mean, the women who use makeup, how many of you use organic makeup? None. Why? Because organic makeup doesn't give you the right kind of color, pigmentation, it's too dry, all of that. But there are products. There are products world over. But the costs, the intent of the manufacturers, etc., etc. So that's just one example. But every category, there are products available globally which I think the Indian consumer deserves. You just need to look all over the globe to figure out where to source from and plonk it in front of the Indian consumer for them to try it, and you'll be amazed at the results. So across the world, if you say the world is my field, you can figure out products that suit the Indian consumer from wherever. I'm just talking Indian consumer. If you look at the globe, etc., there are immense possibilities.
Lovely to know that we have a lot of possibilities for growth. I would probably do this as a last question and let's open it up for the audience because this is a very interesting model. We've had a lot of asks for questions. So one common question for all three of you. If you were to think of the future, both from an India standpoint, India market, solving for India market, and as well as from a growth model standpoint, because we are exploring, experimenting every model out there today in India. What would your advice be for somebody who's experimenting that? And what would be your caution? please.
I can go first. I would say I think more conviction in the value prop. A friend of mine who talks on pricing says this, that it's not about hoping that you can price your product, it's knowing that you can price your product. The tendency, especially, I don't know if it's India specific or not, is to throw it for free and or just reduce prices, because that's the best way to grow market share, and you more often than realize that you're actually undervaluing the product or the proposition. I would say have conviction so that you know exactly what to price it, and price it from the beginning versus we'll think about it later, and pricing comes as a phase 2. And that way you're starting off with the right economics. Of course, there'll always be times when you're discounting offers, all of that. I'm not saying there's no place for any of that. Just that having very clear idea of what's the price to value for your product, and have that conviction so that you build a business that's sustainable based on the right economics from the ground up.
Lovely. Priya?
I think we in India especially are on the cutting edge of innovation. I think we see a lot, given all the unicorns that we have here and their need for products and services. I think it's a great opportunity, as long as your product has a very clear value prop, and being able to show them, this is what you'll get with these products. But you have to scale with them. I mean, what would have been a startup with very minimal needs, like when you start, and then a year later you find that they just, their needs are, through the roof. So you have to really, bear in mind that these small startups that might be your customers today are going to scale. So, in fact, I think a very positive thing for us has been, as these companies grew, they also helped drive our product and its capabilities. So to me, it was, really, great growth that will come for you from your customers, especially here.
Excellent. So keeping up with the customers almost.
So, what to look out for, I think, is it always starts with the consumer. And you've got to stay consumer-centric at all times. You take your eyes off, you get product-centric or competition-centric, you start losing the plot. Your relevance starts going down. So consumer centricity is important at whatever phase you are. And let's say taking your eye off the ball is what leads to other people really kind of taking that opportunity and kind of socking you where it hurts. So that's one big thing. Caution obviously is you need to do within the, so when I used to be in apparel, my designers used to come with some fancy designs and say, this, I need to put it there. Good, who's going to buy? And at what price? If it's not going to pass that filter, please keep it at your desk, no problem. So I think we are in commercial art or commercial is a reality. It needs to pass that muster. If it doesn't, then that's something, I mean, when you have to be cautious about. And a lot of people in a discussion or an argument will kind of keep justifying it. And that person is not really able to justify, but the passion kind of gets you to override that clause. So you've got to be passionate where you have to. You've got to be dispassionate where you have to, especially on the commercial and financial front.
Wonderful. To summarize, conviction in your product, so grow sustainable business, grow with the customer, so that the customer takes you along, and never lose sight on your customer. I think that's kind of been the advice. With that, thank you so much. That was an excellent conversation. Open to audience for questions. Mic, please, if you can. Oh, we already have. Can we pass the mic, please? Please introduce yourself and then question for the group.
Hi, my name is Vineet. Actually, I have a question specifically for Mr. Venkatramani. So you spoke about, I hope I didn't pronounce your name incorrectly.
That's okay.
So you spoke about customer centricity, and you gave the example of how you want to understand the skin tone, right? The question I have is, how do you scale that, right? I mean, it's always good, because scaling that at a at a country level or even at a city level or is where I see the real challenge, right?
I have it's scaled up. The solution is there on a tablet in the store. It's there on an app if you have it. You can take the test yourself. It's a simple recommendation engine. You can buy the products that are recommended for you on the app itself if you are using the app, or if you're at the store, our expert will help you pick the products that will really suit you. And over the last 6 months, we have around close to 3 lakh users who've already availed of the test and bought recommended products. See, one of the important things for scaling, or requirements for scaling, is a consumer pull. If you don't have a necessary, if this was not a need, it'll just be a gimmick, right? They'll say, yeah, there's a fancy gadget in the store, they're trying to sell you something. But if I'm addressing a need, they will say, so for the first time that I've been in this company, I've seen women come back with their friend, sister, mother, daughter, husband saying, inka bhi karo. Yeah, because they believe it is useful for them to know about it. It is not driven by any brand sponsoring for a recommendation. It is driven by dermatologist logic. It doesn't have user reviews, it's got dermatologist rating. And it is true to the purpose of building trust with the customers and ensuring that they are better empowered to choose products that suit them. Otherwise, when science doesn't exist, marketing takes over. Fancy looks, there's this thing standing, ma'am, try this cut and all that. And there are imperfect people who are trying to earn an incentive, whether it suits your skin or no. So this really kind of empowers you with the right information to be. So if it doesn't have a pull, I won't get positive word of mouth. So it might be a little difficult initially to drive trials, but once trials are done, from a technology perspective, I have scaled it. There's no problem. So I just need to increase the number of tablets in the store.
How did you educate the people? Like we took a small survey, right? Maybe only 4 women knew about that skin tone is actually important. How did you educate?
Educate who? Consumers.
Yeah, the consumers.
So in the store. So the good part is we have something that a lot of businesses don't have. We have a store. People keep coming in. When I was in Unilever, I said, "Kash hamara store hota." When I got into apparel, I have my own store. When I got into a Walmart, I have my own store. When I'm here, I have my own store. The good part about store is people are constantly coming in. Earlier, we used to pay. If I had launched a new soap, I would kind of do a market test, user test, get repeated 200, 300 samples in a single city, go after 8 days of usage, get feedback, etc. If I want to see if a new fit that I'm developing fits a woman and whether she likes it, I just used to send my designer to the store with the higher footfall and say, give them a gift voucher, get them to try it, get feedback. I have my feedback in 2 days, right? So one is so I have experts all over the stores, so we had to train them. They're the same experts who were just selling in the store earlier, but they're trained in basics on skin, makeup and all of that. We had to give them more information on how to just ensure that you're administering this to the customer. You don't need to sell. They were wondering, how do I sell? You don't need to sell. She will buy what suits her. You don't have to do any job of selling, but you need to have your knowledge. If she says, why not this, why not that? You need to say this has retinol or this has salicylic acid or whatever, etc. Your knowledge needs to be there. This is something that enables you to build a trust and let her choose what she wants. That part took around 5 to 6 months for the stores to kind of really master and come to a point they were recommending a regime as opposed to just 1 or 2 products and be happy. But the consumer understands. If there is a need, I will understand.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Arun. I have a question for the entire panel. As Shalini mentioned, so this is about going from 1 to 100. Say any company has gone from 0 to 1, they've found product market fit, they have somewhat of a decent customer value prop. How do you scale non-linearly? That is, okay, your company is trying to get better market share, more growth, adoption and so on, but you need a delivery engine to deliver that value to the customer. How do you kind of not make it a linear relationship? You add a bigger sales team, you add a bigger operations team, and you can scale that. But can you make it non-linear? What are your thoughts on that?
I think, especially as you're trying to understand your product market fit, you need to figure out what those levers are that can give you that non-linearity. Again, I'm going to go back to my example, just to bring home the point. I mentioned accountants earlier, right? Or word of mouth in general. If you just keep it as generic, that's one of those levers that can give you non-linearity, where it's not about putting more people or spending more ad dollars or marketing spend It is finding those levers in your, again, depends on, it may be different in the example that Brahmani gave. It's those customers who are going and bringing their mommies and aunties and whatnot, right? That the virality, it's not, you cannot put more and more people, and you cannot keep opening more and more stores to go scale up versus getting more people to the existing stores and existing staff. Similarly, finding those levers that could be non-linear for you, which is going to be specific to the business you have, but understanding what those levers are, and that takes time. Really being the shoes of your customers, understanding why do they buy, who's the buying, who's actually making the decision. Even in the, again, just great example. So I'm going back to the same example. Is it the person coming in that's deciding, or it's someone else behind that person who's helping them making this decision? Knowing all of that entire supply chain of the thought process that goes into that purchase will help you understand who could be that person who can unlock you that non-linearity versus where you probably see at the surface looks like a customer buying your product.
I can just add a little to that. So what we do is you also observe, you do more of what's working, right? While at the same time building new markets that you can go after. An example would be if you see, a certain vertical where you have a lot of success, we go heavy duty, make it an industry package solution. So now you can go, and now when you're reaching out, you're going in there with a lot more value that the customer sees. You're speaking their language, you're giving them examples of how they can see more value. It's about showing them that value. At the same time, you also need to, while you're scaling up, you also need to explore other areas. Like, maybe your product finds a lot of fit with B2B, and now you find there's a lot of B2C companies there. Is there a different approach that you can take, right? And so you really have to grow both breadth-wise and depth, right? And
I would also say around market, right? So consumers become part of the market, but there is also market factors that are driving. So some of the organizations, you have to keep an eye, you have to be ahead of the market. While as a category leader, you can grow the market, or you can help customers discover the market, but if you're not there, non-linearity comes from that too, which is you're especially helping customers discover a brand new market would be an excellent way of, that is where understanding of consumer comes. But on the other hand, there could be a lot of market forces. What happened in the pandemic, it gave non-linearity to so many businesses. So it's the art of the possible there too. So I think I would say market and consumer.
I think the fundamental reason for non-linear growth is that it can happen only when you're addressing a very powerful need powerfully, and it has not been addressed by others. You have to have a very strong pull. Without that pull, there cannot be non-linearity. You will be spending hoping for non-linearity. If that fundamental connect is not there, then don't even bother looking for non-linearity. Spend in a disciplined fashion and scale up. Because the pull drives everything. Let's not kid anybody. In fact, way back in the early FMCG days, we used to always figure out what drives sales. Sales and distribution or brand pull. It's always the brand pull. It's like the Indian Army says, saying that it's our job to get an enemy to meet the God. That's it. So sales and distribution or delivery systems are only a facilitator. Yeah. Awareness is an initial step for you to try. Once you try, if your repeat is fantastic, if your delight is outstanding, then you have a case for non-linear growth. Otherwise, it is linear. So and this is largely, I feel, fueled by ambition. Investor ambition, head of the organization ambition, founder ambition. Okay. I think only when you pinch yourself, you realize whether it is worth it or no, or you learn it the other way.
Thank you. That's all we have is time for questions. Thank you all for being an excellent audience. Thank you, panel.